Long time ago, when I was a kid, I used to live in a colony where there was only one grocery store, and the owner of the store was our neighbor. I used to call him Mamu, which means uncle in Odia. Few years ago, when I went to my home in so-called IT holidays, that is work from home, he came to our home to meet me. From my childhood, he used to give me candies with love, and so I used to go to his store every time I had to buy something. Long story short, when he came to meet me, I was held up in a production defect. The production servers were not responding very well to the newly implemented changes. The response time was so high, and 4 production servers were not able to handle the traffic. Seeing my uncle, I took a break from my work to talk to him and, of course, to get the candies. He was able to sense the tension from my face and asked me what happened. I was really pissed by that time because of my work. So I just replied him like this work. Sometimes I feel like leaving this job and joining your store. He laughed. He laughed as if I had cracked the funniest joke of his life. And he said, "You are welcome." Now he took a deep breath and started with his story. When you were a kid, I started my business. Do you remember? I used to have that small room as my store and only had basic grocery items. I was not even having candies and ice creams. Gradually, I started keeping those. And do you remember that city homes builder? When he started construction work and people started moving in, there was a huge increase in demand. I had to keep lots of stocks, but I was not having enough space for that. That was the time when I was going through lots of pressure. Then I decided to rent another nearby store for resolving storage problem. And so I did. I kept good in both the stores and thus the storage issue was resolved. But soon after that, I started facing another new challenge. As I had 2 stores, I had to go back and forth between those 2 stores, which was taking long time to serve customers. Because of that, some customers were heading towards other stores. Now this was a business problem. So I thought of hiring someone who can help me in managing all. But it was not so easy. Getting a good person with prior knowledge in handling the store work was quite difficult. But finally when I got few, they were asking for an amount that I could never had afforded at that time. So instead I hired some local in less price and started training them. In just few weeks, they were as good as an experienced person, at least up to an extent that I wanted them to be. That easily resolved my later issue. From that time till today, there were many workers who worked with me and many left as well. But it was always an easy task to get some inexperienced labor rather than an experienced one. And also, in the price of an experienced labor, I can hire 3 cheap laborers who work with the same efficiency in weeks. Right now, I stand at a point where I have 47 workers in my store, and maybe only 7 to 10 of them are experienced. All of them started as a fresher in my store. They are coordinating and managing the store so efficiently that right now I don't have to go and sit in the store for whole day. Now back to Hadoop. His story is a perfect example of Hadoop framework. Let's say you have a system with 500 GB of disk size. If you want to store 300 or 400 GB, it's fine. But what if you want to store more than 500 GB? Just like the businessman with small store at first and wanted to store more products. Like how he bought a new store, as per Hadoop framework, you can also buy a new system and add that to your existing cluster. If you have a 500 GB system and you want to store file size of 1 TB, then you don't have to throw the old 500 GB disk. You just have to add new disk space to the existing cluster. Also, Hadoop runs on commodity hardware, that is, cheap labor in case of businessmen. It doesn't require high performance and high availability systems, which saves a lot of money. And also, it is easy to get and install commodity hardwares rather than high availability hardwares. Also, Hadoop is known for accomplishing 3 V's of big data, that is, volume, velocity, and variety. Let's talk about volume. With social media space, for example, there are over 2 billion Facebook users, 1 billion YouTube users, 350 million Twitter users, and almost around 700 million Instagram users. Every second, there used to be millions of photos, videos posted over these platforms, which generates a huge data. Storing and maintaining this type of huge amount of data can be resolved using Hadoop. Next comes velocity. The problem is simple. Although the storage capacity of hard drive have increased massively over the past years, the rate at which data can be read from devices have not kept up. One typical drive from 1990 could store 1 GB of data and had a transfer speed of 4.4 MB per second. So you could read all the data from a full drive in around 5 minutes. Over 20 years later, 1 TB drives are the norm, but the transfer speed is around 100 Mbps. So it takes more than 2.5 hours to read all the data of the disk. This is a long time to read all data on a single drive, and writing is even slower. The obvious way to reduce the time is to read from multiple disks at once. Imagine if we had 100 drives, each holding 1/100th of the data. Working in parallel, we can read the data in under 2 minutes. Now coming to variety, the traditional RDBMS system is good for storing structured data. But what about unstructured and semi-structured data? From a study, it was found that more than 70 to 80% of the data in today's world are in the forms of images, videos, text chats, and big log files. Our traditional RDBMS system cannot process these files, whereas Hadoop is good for all type of data. So it gives flexibility to work with such a huge variety of data. The complete Hadoop framework is based on two core concepts. One is Hadoop Distributed File System or HDFS, and second one MapReduce. Let's discuss about these two concepts in our next videos.